We're joined by Greens leader Bob Brown. Welcome.
Hello, Chris.
What was gained by the deal that you struck with the government?
$140 million in the coming years for Australians who depend upon the federal government for funding of education, schools, childcare, potentially transport, or the equivalent, if you like, of 100 or 200 teachers or nurses. A pretty important gain that was lost when the decision was made to remove the tax from mining companies earning up to $75 million. They're quite sizable companies. They got the money. We wanted the money given back so that it wouldn't be teachers and nurses being sacked to pay for it.
But the government itself says this is money it had identified for its mid-year review, so savings that it had made anyway. All it's done is brought forward an announcement.
No, it said that it was considering it for its mid-year review. Now it's locked in. And it's a big decision because it's money that's going to come from foreign banks or from financial institutions that are borrowing overseas. And it means their interest withholding tax is going to be paid for a year extra. Big difference though for people on the ground and for people who depend upon federal funding. So what we've done effectively is get schools ahead of mines, whereas as of yesterday mines were ahead of schools.
But the intent of that tax was to make housing and business loans cheaper. That's what was the intent of giving that tax break.
Well, the business loans will still be flowing and readily available, but if at the other end of it, Chris, we're not going to see the number of public servants who may go in the next round of cuts, and we're looking at that with MyEFO, with the mid-year report coming up potentially next week. The government says it wants to make sure it has a surplus this year. Something's going to give there, and I'm very concerned, and the Greens are very concerned, that that will include vital parts of the delivery of public well-being. And our priority is with the public interest. The big mining corporations, largely owned overseas, can look after themselves. They should be paying more tax, not less. When we saw them getting less, we decided that we'd move in and say, not at the expense of our schools, our hospitals, our
One final thing on this,
transport.
this just looks like an accounting exercise really, because the government had actually already factored it into its mid-year estimates, and now it's going to have to find another $140 million if it wants to make those budget savings that it keeps talking about.
Well, that's the job in front of them. We've done our job. We've secured $140 million for Australians and the public interest. That was our job. We've carried it out.
Isn't the big green win this week what Tony Windsor got, which was $200 million to make sure that there are proper environmental assessments of coal seam gas?
Yeah, congratulations, Tony Windsor and Rob Oakeshott. That's a really important breakthrough. And I hear the mining industry complaining about that. They're more overseeing. For goodness sake, no, let's have a recognition that you need to know what the impact's going to be on water systems upon which our food growing depends, our farmers depend, and our biodiversity depends. That's reasonable, and Tony Windsor and Rob Oakeshott have achieved that. Good on them.
Will the Greens support the bill now when it goes to the Senate? You've done a deal for the lower house, but it appears that you're reserving your position on the Senate.
Yes, we've always said that we didn't want to see the tax reduced, and as of yesterday that was going to happen. Now we've made sure it doesn't get reduced. The alternative here is Tony Abbott's proposal to give the mining companies some $10, $11 billion money at the expense of the Australian people. Really? Well, we won't be supporting that, but we will be working, Chris, through the Senate, and the Senate does this very well, to get feedback from the public, from small business, for example. We want to change the government's proposal to give the big corporations a 1% tax cut to a 5% tax cut for small business, so that they really do get it. And I mean, why should the big banks be getting...
But are you going to be holding up for that?
Why should the big banks be getting $4 billion in tax breaks when they're ripping so much money and so many service fees out of small business, which in the two-speed economy is finding it quite hard to make ends meet. Sure. Now, we the Greens are there to help small business and the people that small business employs many more people than the big banks or the mining industry.
Certainly, but are you going to be holding out for these things? Are you going to be knocking off this tax if you don't get some changes?
No, our intention is to improve the tax. And as I explained to your colleagues here today, the Senate system is not for nothing. And we will expect that we'll have business and the community players who are looking at the tax system. Look at the superannuation system. Why should a few percent of the top income earners get $12 billion in tax breaks out of the proposal? Why shouldn't we make sure that that's spread a bit about across the to the middle order and lower income earners so that they get a fair break too? We'll be looking into that and hoping we can get an improvement.
Finally, briefly on this, did it look good for you to do a deal in the middle of the night on something that you weren't allowed to talk about?
Well, it was a caveat put on it by the government. We said we want to go out there and tell people exactly what's going on. They said no, we've got reasons why you shouldn't do that. We honoured that agreement with them and we delivered to the Australian people.
Bob Brown, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.